There is a moment in life when something feels strange. You're not exactly worse, but you're not better either. Decisions change, contexts change, yet the inner result repeats. It feels as if life is turning in the same place. Most people call this fate, bad luck, or a lack of willpower. Ancient civilizations called it a loop. The Ouroboros was not created to speak about eternity, nor about elevated spirituality. It was created to show what happens when internal conflicts are not integrated. When consciousness stops, repetition takes over. And perhaps the most important question is not, why does this keep happening to me? But rather, what within me is feeding this cycle. The Ouroboros never spoke of eternity. It spoke of repetition. For centuries, the Ouroboros has been presented as a beautiful symbol. Infinite, continuous, eternal, almost comforting. But a closer look reveals the detail that is almost always ignored. The serpent does not advance. It turns. It consumes itself. The movement is closed, circular, with no exit. The Ouroboros does not describe growth. It describes what happens when consciousness stops moving forward and the mind begins to orbit itself. This ancient symbol was never meant to calm anyone. It was born as a visual warning. The tail being devoured does not speak of harmony. It speaks of cycles that feed themselves, thoughts that return, emotions that repeat, decisions that change form, but never outcome. It is the experience of promising change, feeling hope, and later realizing that everything has returned to the exact same point. Not from lack of effort, but because the internal pattern was never touched. What is most unsettling is understanding where the symbol truly points. The Ouroboros does not speak of the world, destiny, or external forces. It speaks of the human mind when it fails to integrate its own conflicts. When a conflict is not observed, it does not disappear. It turns into habit. And when it becomes habit, it begins to feed on you. At that moment, the symbol stops being ancient or distant and becomes dangerously close. Perhaps that's exactly why so many civilizations took this warning so seriously, where the Ouroboros emerged, and why it was never an innocent symbol. The oldest records of the Ouroboros appear in ancient Egypt, around 1300 BCE, in the enigmatic Book of the Netherworld, found in the tomb of Tutankhamun. And the circular serpent surrounding scenes of life, death, and renewal was not decoration. It was a map of time, a visual warning that everything which does not transform returns to its point of origin. The very name of the symbol reveals its function. Ouroboros comes from the Greek oura, tail, and boros, one who devours. Literally, the one who devours its own tail. There is no romanticism here. The word describes a closed, self-contained movement that feeds on itself. It does not speak of elevated infinity, but of continuous internal consumption. For the Egyptians, time was cyclical, not linear. The Ouroboros showed that the end was not the problem, and the problem was returning to the same place without awareness. When the symbol reached Greece and later alchemy, it carried the same weight. It came to represent the unfinished work, energy circulating without true transformation. The phrase "hen pan," the all is one, pointed to the necessity of integrating opposites to break the cycle. In none of these cultures was the Ouroboros considered innocent. It was always a warning, a reminder of the risk of becoming trapped in one's own movement. And when this foundation becomes clear, the question arises naturally. What happens when the cycle stops being cosmic and begins operating inside the human mind? The Ouroboros within the mind, loop, habit, and self-sabotage. When the Ouroboros leaves cosmology and enters the human mind, it becomes uncomfortably familiar. It comes to represent recurring thoughts, repeating emotions, and decisions that change shape but not result. It is the pattern of promising change, and later realizing that everything has returned to the same point, not from lack of effort, but from lack of internal integration. Psychologically, the Ouroboros describes the mental loop, when unresolved conflicts turn into automatic habits. What is not observed does not vanish, it repeats. The mind begins feeding on the same narratives, justifications, and impulses, spinning in circles while believing it is moving forward. This is how self-sabotage installs itself without being noticed. The central point is that the Ouroboros does not speak of weakness, but of the absence of applied awareness. When there's no integration between thought, emotion, and action, the system enters autopilot. And in that state, it is not you who decides, the pattern does. This understanding prepares the ground for the most direct question of all. When this loop governs, who is really in control of your life? When the Ouroboros governs, you don't evolve, you spin. When the Ouroboros takes command, life does not collapse into immediate chaos. It slips into silent repetition. Decisions feel conscious, but they are recycled reactions. Scenarios change, people change, yet the internal outcome remains the same. That is how the loop sustains itself, not through explicit pain, but through familiarity. The pattern becomes comfortable, even as it drains you. At this point, the symbol stops being philosophical and becomes a functional diagnosis. The Ouroboros shows what happens when internal opposites are not integrated. Impulse begins deciding before awareness, and habit governs in place of choice. The person does not feel out of control. They feel that this is just how it is, and this normalization is precisely what keeps the cycle alive. The Ouroboros does not accuse, judge, or threaten. It simply reveals. It reveals that without consciousness, there is no progress, only rotation, and every rotation consumes energy. When this becomes clear, the need for something different emerges naturally, not to spin faster, but to break the loop. And this is exactly where the next symbol enters, not as a circle, but as movement. And after understanding the Ouroboros this way, the question stops being symbolic and becomes personal. Where exactly is your life spinning? Which decisions do you repeat while believing they are new? Which promises do you remake expecting a different outcome without touching the conflict that sustains the cycle? The Ouroboros does not say that repetition is wrong. It says that repetition without awareness has a cost. Energy, time, presence, all are consumed when life enters automatic rotation. And the most dangerous part is not the exhaustion, but the sense of normality. When the loop becomes habit, the person stops noticing that they could choose differently. Breaking the cycle does not require force nor external rupture. It requires observation, noticing when impulse takes over, noticing when awareness goes silent. Small pauses, small clearer choices begin to break the closed movement, not all at once, but from the inside out. The Ouroboros only points to the problem. It shows what happens when there is no integration. But there is another symbol that speaks of the next step, not of spinning, but of moving, not of repetition, but of direction, and that is where we go next. If this content resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and continue this journey with us. Here, symbols are not meant to decorate, they are meant to reveal and transform.